Okay, here's All Is Lost, Save Honor. This is Europa Simulazione game covering an era that I really love the idea of there being games on. It's been very sparse. Here it's the Italian Wars, 1494 to 1530. Well, this is the French interventions in northern Italy. And there's a few games that cover a little bit of it. I have Condottieri, which I think may touch on it, some of the aspects of it. Of course, I played their own Guelphs and Ghibellines, which is of an earlier era, a more medieval era. This is right at the end of the medieval era. And if you played or watched my playthrough of Europa Universalis, this is an important couple of events in that game. Being covered on an operational level in a style in a period that very few games come out on at all. So it's very attractive to me that way. Now I want to warn you guys, this is going to be particularly rough, especially with the intro and maybe the first playthrough, because this is truly a first look at the game. I've read the rules. I'm gonna struggle through them with you again. There's quite a bit here. It's a 50-page rule book, but about a little bit less than half of its scenarios. So we're looking at about a 30-page rule book. I'll be playing with most of the optional rules except for the simplified combat. Or at least trying to. Okay, what do you get with it? Well, you get this map, which it looks really beautiful. It doesn't have quite the texture of the Clash of Arms maps, but it's a very well executed in terms of the visual aspect. Very faint in terms of the hexes, etc. You kind of have to look closely to see that. The counters themselves look like high quality. You have little images of all the different leaders who they have paintings for. If you look over the Venetians, all the leaders have the same portrait. Well, almost all, which is kind of a shame, but it's what you got to do. The actual quality of the leader cards is fairly flimsy. This is, I call this out especially because ES generally does really good components on everything, and in this game they've done a very good job on everything except these cards. They remind me a little bit of the SPI cards. You'll see them in things like Dallas or War of the Ring there. They ripped out of a thin sheet. I have no problem with it. If you want to make them a little sturdier, slip them in some plastic or whatever. But it's not like you have to shuffle them. Here's your turn record track. And actually, I didn't realize. I thought these were actually supposed to go on the leaders. Put those there. I haven't figured out where I'm going to start my supply yet. We'll look at the scenario specifics again. You also have this, which I don't know how terribly useful it is, but it highlights the regions. Now these letters are faintly printed on the map, but if you want a little bit more clearly, this would be helpful for that. And this is kind of a glossy stock. And you have a weather chart and terrain key, both of which might be important if, like in this scenario, you're playing a half map and you don't want everything on, and you end up covering up some of the board or something. Here's a compendium of all the different unit types, and this is kind of shows something that's hard to cope with. So where the different types are applicable, it's hard, for example, to tell what's cav and what's not. You know, you get kind of a half body for cav and a full standing body for infantry, but beyond that it's not terribly easy. I think you'll get more recognition of it. And you also have distinguishment. So for example, these are Italian units but in French service, and they're going to be colored green. That's not that big a deal because these things are never on the map, the actual units. The game directly attributes Zucker, and honestly a lot of some of the sort of core underlying principles, the action points. Zucker calls it the supply system. I see it more as a command system, but here it's money, supposedly, is going to be reflected in a similar system as his. The individual leader tracks is very much based on that. And then units which have strength points, and we'll talk about the values on these in a moment, that are reflected on the track, yet each unit has its own maximum strength points that it can hold. But this game goes into a lot more detail than most of the Zucker games that I've seen. I haven't looked at some of the more recent ones. I know they've got cards and all kind of cool stuff on them. Got a little battle board here. It can be useful because you have to divide things up in the major battles by the different sections. You have a whole bunch of player aids, and they're all printed on fairly heavy stock with some nice texture on them. I'm going to get these too dirty and they're not going to look as pretty after I play them because my poor fingers are always covered in tobacco. But a number of different combat and other tables here. Generation of the administrative points. Very familiar to you if you're used to the Zucker designs. We have something new in the game which we'll touch on, which is orders. Units are under orders in this game. I don't think Zucker used this, but maybe he's added in later things. And you basically have to pay to change the orders, and then they can keep them. But at certain times you have to pay to give everyone orders. It's kind of a neat twist on the normal AP, on the normal action points. A summary of the different types of units, how they work, some more tables. Tactical options. When you do the major battle, each player is going to have these kind of sort of sub-orders for the battle that they can assign to their units. And you pretty much just get assigned all of them. It's not like it's a random pull or anything, which took me a moment to realize. But you assign each individual command or corps, if you like, orders that it's going to follow, and they have a couple of them. And that'll allow, in some cases it's special abilities, in some cases it's just allowing you to actually attack. Alright. Like I said, I have to figure out where I want to put my supply markers for the scenario. Let us take a look at... Oh, by the way, the map is very high. It's got a lot of thickness to it, and that means there's a bit of pooch. I've put some things on top of it. One of the shames of it all is the best maps that there are the ones you maybe most need to put plexiglass over to flatten them out. I'm going to try not to. There aren't big stacks in this game, so it shouldn't be too big an issue. It starts out with a historical overview or look at the French interventions. Okay. The rule book itself, sometimes the wording is a little bit off in terms of, it's obvious that whoever either wrote this, and it might be Nicola, the designer, I know he's fluent in English, or someone may have translated it for him, was very comfortable with the game and the rules and understanding that, and they seem to be presented very nicely in that sense. But every now and then there's like, just this linguistic, wow, that's not how a native English speaker would write this. Certainly not an American English speaker. Okay. And sometimes that can kind of just throw a little monkey wrench in things. It's also a little bit verbose, but that's okay for me, especially when we're trying to get new ideas through. So each unit, the combat units, which are kept on these tracks here, are... they give a number of different pieces of information. One is the image tells you what the unit is like. Some units have an identifier which indicate they're part of a larger group. So this would be like the Band Negro or something like that. Reliability class and quality are two separate ideas here. Troop quality is going to be basically the morale of the force. Whereas reliability class is going to be more the I'm willing to follow orders. So very high quality units might not necessarily want to engage at all in this era of mercenaries and the like, and that can cause issues. Also, you might have difficulty reining in knights or whatever, but I think that's not covered by the reliability. I think the reliability is the reliability of the troops to actually fight at all. Some units are going to have breakdowns. I've sorted the ones out for this scenario. Basically, they're smaller units that you can break the larger ones into. So, for example, these guys are 2 quality S5s, and they have a strength of 4, and it's red, which means they've got firearms. Well, that's basically 2 units that make this up. So if you need more counters to split your forces up, you have that opportunity under certain periods. This is done, I don't know when it's done. Yeah. I think it's during the consolidation phase. You can break units down and build them up. Leaders themselves also have counters. Now those are the ones that are on the board, but let's take a look at some of the closer ones, because if you've got a commander-in-chief like Louis, he can have multiple leaders under him, and those have some values on them. Essentially, they reproduce the initiative and rank values on the leader here. So Tivolitz here is a 4-3, and if we find him, Tivoluzio, he's got a 4-3 here. The rank is the number of counters, subordinate units he can have under his command. Now, unlike some of the Zucker games, subordinate commanders don't count against your unit cost, and I don't think the engineers do. I've got room for them if they do, so I'll have to rearrange if that's the case. The back side is a hidden movement side. I believe all the capitani, captains, are face up at the beginning of the scenario, but if you detach like a subordinate or something, you won't know who it is that's out there. So he'll come out and go flying off as this. And I don't think you're allowed to like poke through the other guy's crap. Yeah, it's supposed to be concealed. So let's take a look at the core sequence of play. And I don't know if this is reproduced on a player aid. I know the combat sequence is. The combat is very complex in this game. Yeah, this is just the combat resolution. Okay. So the core sequence of play starts off with a weather phase where you randomly generate the weather. No big shock there. You got a little chart for it. We got it reproduced elsewhere based on the month that it is. An administrative segment. I'm sorry. Let's see. Okay. Then we hit the command phase, and that's going to be split into 2-player sections. And each player does his 2 sections, and then the other player does his. The administrative segment is whenever you hit a yellow turn, you generate new action points, or orders points, admin points is what they're called. You can also shift where your supply source is, and you're going to have certain starting supply sources, and you mark the one that you want active here. Now, if you're used to the Zucker games, there's going to be a command, usually there was a supply source on the map, and then a sort of command center. Well, your command center in this game is going to be your primary captain. Your Capitano Generale. Oh, let's see what else we have here. Then you're allowed to organize, activate, and deactivate minor Capitani. We have these things if we need. Each side has 1 in this scenario. In other scenarios, they might have up to 2. If you need somebody who can command just, a couple units, you can split him off to do that. He might actually be better than some of your named people, For example, Naldi here is pretty crappy, but okay. You can shift combat units between Capitani who are in the same hex, and you can transfer strength points between units if they're in the same hex, as long as they're basically the same unit, which is to say quality, reliability, movement allowance, national origin, alignment, whatever. All that has to match. And there are usually a few units in each, well, in this scenario, there's a few units in each army that can conceivably transfer forces back and forth. Okay. Then we hit the activation phase, and this gets kind of weird. I forgot about this. Okay, both players indicate the Capitano on the map that they wish to activate. The first player indicates first which one he wants to activate. Then each player rolls a die and subtracts the Capitano's initiative rating. The initiative rating can be modified by his order. I mentioned there are orders to units. Well, so for example, he has an attack order. Right now that doesn't modify his initiative, but if it's his second activation with that leader, we have little markers for whether you've done 1 or 2 activations or none, and you don't put a marker on, he would get a penalty to his initiative and thus have a harder time. Some units, some things like garrison here just cancel out your initiative. Okay. Whoever gets the better roll determines which of the 2 Capitani selected activates. The activated one must perform his actions, and then he gets an activation marker, one of these suckers here, next to him. And they can be put on the board. I think the orders might be on the board too, I'm not sure. Then this process is continued from step A with the player who just terminated his action, indicating his next Capitano he wants to roll for. So there's a reason to leave your most effective in terms of initiative leader unrolled for, because you can keep forcing the other guy to play with that. But of course, if you pick someone, if you want to use him, you end up activating him and taking the penalty, and you can't choose a Capitano for this who doesn't have any activations left to take. Eventually, someone will have all his Capitanos take 2 activations, or just choose not to activate anymore. And at that point, the other player gets to play 1 activation for each Capitano who has not yet taken an action at all. He doesn't get the double actions with these. So there's an interesting kind of decision making in the pulsing here that could play into the game. Then both players can consolidate forces. If they're in a hex with 2 or more Capitani in the map, there can only be 1 Capitani counter on the hex. The other Capitani with the Capitano General are removed from the map and placed on his card as shown here. I think you have to consolidate anything that's not with a Capitano General into the same force, or it gets eliminated, into a singular force, or it gets eliminated. Okay. After the movements, and there's a possibility for skirmishes to occur during movement, we'll touch on that, but you can basically try to push the enemy aside. And this is a different mechanism, but it's familiar to players of those games. Any Capitani that are adjacent to enemy forces with their front side face up reveal their composition of their forces. Then Capitani adjacent to enemy forces with their front side down are turned face up. So you get a little bit more information as you go. Then we'd resolve battles, and battles are kind of mandatory. They're sort of locking zones of control, but they're not what you expect here. It's more complicated, and we'll get to it in a bit. Then after the battle is resolved, any multi-force hexes are consolidated. Any disruption markers get removed. Penalties generally caused by battle, but also by movement. And then we hit an attrition segment, and you have to check attrition if you're in an enemy zone of control, if you're under siege, if you're in a hostile region, or in a barren or unhealthy land. And we see if somebody's won the victory conditions, and otherwise we move the turn forward and keep going. All right, we're gonna take our time filming this one, so I'm gonna take a break here. We'll come back. Just work our way through these rules over time. It's going to be a long one. So let's take a look at the leadership rules here that we have. So you're allowed to command on your card a number of units equal to your rank, which is what I followed here. And then auxiliary units don't count against you, and that's things like the engineers here. The Capitano General is allowed to command other Capitanos, and he can command any number of them, plus whatever units he can command by his rank. The Capitano General, the Capitano who's higher than any other rank in the army is going to be the Capitano General for the army. However, in a consolidation segment, if two Capitani General of the same army coexist in the same hex, don't ask how that happens. There's a possibility of getting a Capitano General. The one with the lower rank stops being a Capitano General. Status is kept if they're from different armies. Now, if you're in command of a force, even if you're not the Capitano General, you're the Primo Capitano. And you're the counter that's deployed on the map. And I don't think we have a situation like that outside of the Capitano Generals, but it's possible you might have some unemployed leaders with a regular Capitano. Unemployed leaders can kind of run around on their own. They have 9 movement points. They don't need orders. And you can use them to take command, either subordinating them to someone else or splitting units off onto them. They're fairly restricted, though. I don't think can command a unit after they've picked up forces. You're allowed to move 2 unemployed Capitanos each time you take an activation, but each one's only allowed to move once per turn. The minor Capitani, already talked about these. These are these guys. You can activate them to replace a Capitano who is eliminated, or they can also be activated to command forces if you don't have an unemployed Capitano you wanted to use. When they're captured, a Capitan is removed from the game. Capitano. If all their forces are removed in combat or pursuit, if an enemy force with Cav enters the hex of an unemployed Capitano, they get a chance to avoid. And through combat results, they can also be removed. Myself just a little bit more room. If a Capitano is eliminated in a major battle, his subordinate units can be reallocated by priorities 1 or 2 of 3.61, which is this. So when a Capitano is eliminated, the troops go to unemployed Capitani in the force, minor Capitani if you can force one, or other subordinate Capitani, but that can't happen during a major battle. And if you can't resolve the forces, I think they're destroyed. In a major battle, they may be held off until the end of the battle. Okay, when a Capitano General is eliminated, the Capitano with the highest rank in the same force becomes Capitano General. But remember, at the same time, it's possible that there's a Capitano on the board with the highest rank overall who could also become the Capitano General. And then you have two of them. The highest ranked one is the real one, in the sense that he's where APs are going to be calculated from, etc. But both can command subordinate units, and as long as they don't combine into one stack, they can both operate as Capitano Generals. And presumably you could generate quite a few of them this way. There's no real advantage to doing that. Having a couple might be kind of cool. But you start the game with kind of your best ranked leader as the Capitano General, and losing him might hurt your overall position. So here I would lose the ability to command 5 units. I don't have a lot of command left, so I'd have to take unit losses to make that work. Some leaders have a little star on them. I don't know if anybody we have on the board does. I don't think we have anybody good enough. I've got accesses here. Maybe I can... Bayard should have one. I don't know. I'm not seeing one, but it's just a standard star. That indicates a bonus in combat. That will help you when rolling on the assault table. It'll help you in pursuit on the die roll. And it also helps on discipline and recovery checks and on attrition. Each leader might also have some special features attached to them. Let's see if we've got... I'm pretty sure we should have. So Louis has the letter okay, we can't control our zoom here. Has the letter I. And we can't really see that on his. And it's also reproduced over here. Okay. That stands for impetuous, which means he must use the cav charge option as his first option in a major battle. There's siege ability, which gives a benefit in artillery siege fire. Artillery ability, which is A, gives an additional an ability to fire more shells than you're normally able to fire. Cavalier, or chivalrous, which allows you to convert F's to P's on the discipline table, whatever that means. There's a lot here that I'm not going to know until I start actually playing it. P is passing discipline, F is failed. Okay, that's pretty easy. I figured there were more complex things there. And then there's the, but he's not allowed to attack an enemy unit that's retreating. Then there's the Temperagoratore, which is indecisive. And this leader costs more to issue an attack order. Alright. So, at the beginning of the game, certain hexes are designated as supply sources. And one of those you'll mark with your national supply source. During the administrative segment, if you want to move it, you flip the supply source over to indicate that the process has begun of moving it, and then you have to move it the next turn. I think there's kind of some words on here that you probably can't see. I can barely see them with my eyes. If an active supply source is occupied, the supply source marker is removed from play, and it's going to be put out of play for the same length of time, I guess. It can be returned at any supply source free of enemy zones of control, 2 turns after removal. Okay, from your supply source, you trace a line of communication to your Capitano General. And this has to be traced on a line of primary or secondary roads. And let's see what we have here. Primary are the red roads, secondary are the orange. For the first segment, and that can be an unlimited distance, but the distance matters. The second segment goes from the road hex cross-country to the receiving force. And that can be no more than 5 hexes. The line of communication can't be traced through enemy forces. It can be traced into but not through a zone of control. And it cannot depart from roads until the last 5 hexes. Okay. Administrative points are used to issue your orders. They can also apply to certain special tasks. Each Capitano General gets administrative points. The Army has a marker, which we've got here. And when we hit a yellow space, we generate new ones. When we hit the yellow space, we will follow a nominal quantity of them that's presented in the scenario instructions. So in the scenario that I'm looking at, there's a little chart here. The French Army starts with 5, and then each yellow turn, they're going to get a 4-point. There's only 2 of them. It's a short scenario. They're going to get a 4-point boost, but that 4-point boost they may not get all of. They have to look at the administrative points table. Here, and you determine the line of communications between the supply source and the Capitano. Roll some dice, and you might get a penalty to the total number of points that you can produce. Some weather conditions will affect this. If you have multiple Capitano General, you only worry about the one who is you worry about the one who is the furthest in line of communication distance rather than the one who's the highest ranked. And I think there's a +10 side to these markers. How about that? Okay. You can reorganize the strength between units. I've already talked about that largely. Issuing and reissuing orders. Each turn, the Capitano General can distribute orders to himself or other primi capitani. Orders must, on turns where, the yellow turns where administrative points are taken, all the orders must be removed and then reissued. You have to trace a command path from the Capitano General to the receiving Capitano. This is going to be an unlimited length of hexes, free of enemy forces or zone of control. If there's more than one Capitano General on the map, you can select which one is issuing all the orders. Each order issued has a cost depending on the type of force, minor or major, that's receiving the order. The orders table it's got to be in here somewhere. Okay. Yeah, lots of tables here. Those look like orders, they're not. Here we go. The orders table gives you the different types of orders, and some of them don't cost anything to put down. And whether the force is major or minor. Now, what is the distinction between a major and minor force? Well, we have to look that up here. The Capitano General is a major force. Everything else is considered minor. And then if it's a new order, you pay a certain price. If you're changing to that order from something else, you pay a certain price. And in some cases, so like maneuver, you get a bonus off of whatever you were doing beforehand. So if you were attacking and now you want to maneuver, you can do that for free. This is how many times in particular Capitano can activate given the order. So for example, if you're doing standard garrison, you can only activate once. And as you can see, you can't move. There are other things you can do in that activation, though. Okay. When a new force is created, you must immediately issue an order paying the points for it. However, during an activation phase, the new force will inherit an activation marker of the same value as the parent force. Furthermore, I don't know what's meant to be that. I think you have to still pay for it. During the administrative segment of turns where the new administrative points are made, all orders will be removed. New orders will be issued in the next organization segment. Now, why do you need the line of communications? And what happens if you don't have it? Are you unable to issue orders? Because there's not really a status for not having orders. Or can you only issue orders that don't cost anything, which is what I think is what is intended. When removing orders, first you remove all previous attack markers, and then all orders are removed except for attacks, which are then turned over to show previous attack. This is because it's difficult to maintain a continuous attack. So there's a special rule for that. If a previous attack marker is present on a Capitano's card, and the attack order is received by the Capitano, the force can make a discipline check. And if they succeed in that, they might get to make another attack order. Otherwise, they could end up failing the discipline check, which I'm not sure what happens because it doesn't say here. Somewhere there's probably a discussion of what happens with discipline checks here. Effects, you end up demoralized, which may or may not be on the back of this. No, that's quarters. Demoralized is the flipped over side of a unit, and these things can't fight. So it's bad to have your, and they have lower movement point allowances. So it's bad to have your forces get demoralized in that way. So you probably want to not do continuous attacks unless you have units that can succeed at a discipline check. Well, what's a discipline check? The discipline is the letter here. And if we flip through all our tables, and we're going to be doing a lot of this here, you look up the letter and you roll a die. There may be some modifiers, and that determines whether you pass or fail. I guess you could double fail, which causes some casualties. Okay. Two forces can occupy the same hex under circumstances if they moved into the same hex to combine into a single force. During the command phase, you can break a subordinate Capitani out, or during the command phase, unemployed Capitani can be assigned combat units and put on the map, and now they're new forces. During movement, you can drop off subordinate Capitanos at any time during the activation phase. This must be done at the instant the Capitano General passes through the hex. You remove the subordinate Capitano from the card and place it on the map. A force must stop moving when any unit in the force runs out of movement points, but you could drop that force off and keep moving with the rest. There's no pro ratio of any of that. Alright, we're going to take another break. So, the activation, we'll just keep pushing this. The activation rules, mainly I went over them as to who goes when. Let's see if there's anything key here. Beyond that core principle of modifications, you get a penalty for being adjacent to the enemy, penalty for second activation. And then when you get your activation, essentially you have to follow an action that matches your orders. And there are a number of actions listed here. We'll touch those in a moment. And the first time you activate, you get a first activation marker, second time you get a second. Some of the orders don't allow a second activation. So a regular march will just be a normal movement, but you can't move next to an enemy. Administrative march doubles your movement force on roads, and there's a special marker for that. When you undertake an administrative march, I think it costs a movement point, but you can remain in administrative march between activations and turns and whatever. And if you're attacked, there's a penalty to you for being attacked. March to contact allows you to move normally, and you can move adjacent to an enemy force, and thus you can attack them. And recover, if you're in standard garrison orders, you can recover from demoralizations, and you can be declared by an eligible force as an additional action to other actions performed with the same order. I don't know what the hell that's meaning to talk about. Movement is your normal, hey, you follow the terrain effects chart, and we have a fairly rich terrain effects chart, not huge. And it worries about the movement entry costs. It also has affecting terrain, which uses a different column on the combat table, and some special effects in major battles. We'll skip most of this. Fortresses, you can be inside or outside a fortress. If you're inside, you get certain defensive benefits. If you're outside, you fight as normally. Okay, so the administrative march, the penalty is, I believe, your quality rating is reduced by 1 for all your units. And it costs a movement point to put the administrative march marker on your unit. Units have zones of control. Which are just the adjacent hexes. If you want to exit a zone of control, your initiative will be modified by the enemy Capitano's initiative for activation. Modifications to initiative. See the initiative modifier table. Let's see if we can find that. There we go. So this is very similar to some of the Zucker games, where if you're adjacent to someone, you take a penalty to your initiative. What does that mean? Well, it means it's going to be harder to get the initiative and thus decide whether or not you get to move your unit. Okay, after you exit a zone of control, there's a pursuit by the enemy force. The exiting force can use movement points to reduce the pursuit effects. If you don't have enough movement points to exit, you'll stand where you are. And how do you obtain movement points? What the hell? Did we miss something on the march? It looks like you just get your movement points. What the hell? If a force obtains enough movement points, okay, how do you get movement points? Okay. The initiative modifier reads a -4. This -4 is then added to the initiative of the indicated Capitano. If he rolls a 3, 3 is subtracted from -2 and a -5 movement point penalty. What? If the indicated Capitano is in the zone of control, I don't know. Alright, so I thought this would just affect the initiative for activation, but it looks like it somehow also affects the movement point table. And I don't know about this rolling for movement points. This seems to be the only place I've seen it. Capitano can try the standard procedure for activation in paragraph 7.2. So let's go back there. That's... Do you have anything where it says roll for movement points? It does not seem to. And there doesn't seem to be a roll for movement points here, so I don't know where the hell this comes from. If the indicated Capitano is in the zone, yeah, that's not it. So the example seems to tell me something that nothing else does. If I wish to exit a zone of control of an enemy Capitano whose initiative rating is 3, the initiative modifier reads -4. Okay, so I'm a 2. No. It's a 3, it's a -4. So this is added to my initiative. I have -2. If I roll a 3, 3 is subtracted from -2. Why? Why? I'm not getting this. Like, I'm not finding anywhere. The example makes perfect sense, but I'm not finding anywhere in the rules this comes from. So, I'll continue to look. We'll take a break again and maybe come back to these rules today. I don't know. But when I start finding shit like this, I get disturbed. This is what I get for skipping over a section that I thought I understood. You calculate your initiative for the Capitano. Then you roll the die and subtract the die roll from the modified initiative rating of your Capitano. This determines who activates it and tells you the modified movement allowance. And somewhere we should have a modified movement allowance, but unfortunately they don't call that out. So we keep looking. If the result is greater than or equal to 0, the activated force may move its full movement allowance. If it's a negative number, so what you do is you roll the activation die roll, subtract it from the initiative. If it's a negative number, that gets a penalty to be the force's movement allowance. Now there is no move 1 hex no matter what in this, so your units may be slower than you're used to in games. Alright. You can't go from a zone of control to another. When you're moving, if you have an attack order, you can attempt to brush somebody out of your side with an out of your way with an attack from march. All combats take place during... It's an exception to the rule that all combats take place during combat and attrition phase. The force moves into the zone of control of the force to be attacked. The owning player declares attack from march. Hidden Capitani are revealed and a skirmish procedure will be applied. Even if there's conditions that would cause other battles to be required, those can be ignored, I guess. After resolving the attack on the assault table, the winning and losing forces behave as if in a skirmish battle, except there's no skirmish advance. Then if the attack from march was successful, the active force may continue its move. If the attacked force does not retreat, a successful before combat, a successful attack from march which vacates the defending hex requires an extra movement point on the part of the active force. And now I have to fucking read all the rules because there's stuff in here that like is so weird and different that I don't think I'll catch it otherwise. That, you know, finding that one thing about roll a die to see if you get to, you know, how big a penalty you get to move. Man, I didn't catch that on my first reading, and now I feel like I have to go through every single line with you guys, and that's going to make this hideous. The cost to enter the attack hex is the road cost. You cannot attack from march if you can't spend that extra movement point to attack. It must be made 1 hex at a time. And we'll come back later when we want to abuse ourselves some more with rules and hit attrition. You know, it's a combination of a couple things. These are very dense and very wordy rules where it's not very easy to find the things that are different. And so, And then there's my tendency to skim. And yeah, I totally missed that sucker. And now I'm worried I'll miss all kinds of other suckers. Because I thought I kind of understood the rules, but nah. Now for attrition, we've already gone through the things that cause it. When you do a second activation, you get an attrition check. During the attrition segment of combat and attrition, if you're in a hostile region or a barren on unhealthy land, a zone of control, or under siege. And there's got to be an attrition table here. Somewhere. There we go. Based on the size of the force, our modifiers, leaders, weather, activation, etc. Discipline. Okay. So, sometimes you're going to have to roll a discipline check. You get a bonus for the Primo Capitano. You get a penalty for something called a forced order. Now, I'm trying to remember what these are. That's if you don't have an order. I've got to find it somewhere. I seem to remember. Do they give us a link to forced order there? That'd be nice. No. But maybe it's elsewhere. Let's see. Discipline is checked. So it's going to be based on the troop quality. You roll a die and cross-reference on the discipline table. Nothing simple here like, you know, just a number that you have to remember. Or just, you know, hey, you have to make your morale check. So you have to roll on here. Oh, the discipline's not by number. Wow. Oh, we've got troop quality and reliability here as two separate things. So when did we choose one or the other? Or are they linked? Maybe they're linked. We have a 1 and a S. That's linked. We have a 3 quality but no letter on these. Let's see here. A 2 is an R. No. They're not linked. So during combat you use the troop quality, and during command and activation you use the reliability to determine whether or not they're going to be, what, disordered by this, I think it is. Who knows? Demoralized, which is the flipped over, as opposed to disrupted, which is these markers. Okay. But we still don't know the something that we were looking for. Forced orders. What the hell are those? Oh. You'd think that would be under orders, no? And forcing order. When an order is issued, if you don't want to pay the action points, or you don't have a command path. Oh. So I guess if you don't have the command path, you have to do a forced order. You issue an order anyway. This is a forced order, and it causes discipline check penalty. Okay. Now you can recover from this during activation. You have to be, I believe, yeah, garrison or stand not in an enemy zone of control. When you activate, you can make a recovery check in addition to other actions, and you have some bonuses there. You get disrupted when you're crossing a river or storming a fortress. When you become disrupted, and maybe not guaranteed, you get a disrupted marker, which is those yellow things over there, and they cost 2 extra movement points to remove the disruption. When your force is disrupted, your quality is reduced by 1 in addition to all other possible reductions. The demoralized is worse. You can't fight. You have a whole series of effects to not fighting, like having to retreat before combat. You might be forced to fight under certain situations. Stacking and consolidation. Yeah, if you can't transfer excess units, if you can't legally stack, you end up losing the excess strength points. Alright. Well, that's as far as I wanted to go before I wandered away last time. So I want to hold off because combat is a huge section. It's a good 5 or 6 pages of rules to handle primarily the major battle combat. So we may be doing this in several steps. Okay, well, with that much trouble on something I thought I did understand, let's go to the part that I'm not really comfortable with, which is the combat itself. Okay. So there's basically multiple types of combat, but there's fundamentally a major combat system and then a simpler system that handles skirmishes. Well, they're all really kind of different, but sieges are a little different from skirmishes and sorties, but they all kind of use the same chart. The major battle breaks it into smaller chunks using some additional features on there. Okay. If you're in the zone of control of an enemy force, you must decide to attack or renounce the attack and force an enemy to attack you. Okay? Now, this starts with the person who has the highest initiative. So that person gets to choose the attack or defense, and they can kind of force the enemy into attacking them, which kind of makes sense. You position yourself in a location where they have to do something about you. If you're not in an enemy zone of control, the attack's not mandatory, but it's allowed. Okay. So the following things get an attack finished marker, one of these suckers. Something that renounced the right to attack just previously, or if it made an attack already, or if it compelled an opposing force to attack, or if it's lost a battle. Then it gets the attack finished and it will not be allowed to attack. But if you are attacked and win a battle, you're allowed to continue with another attack. In fact, you must continue with another attack if there's someone that you have to resolve with, although you could refuse the battle by using the renounce the attack. Okay. If the primo capitano is on both sides, then it's going to be a major combat. Otherwise, it just resolves as one of these others. A skirmish, a siege in which the defender's inside a fortress. Now, what's not clear is whether a siege it can be a major combat or not. I believe it cannot, but we'll see. And a sortie in which the attacker is coming out of a major battle. And again, this could be both capitanos, so the priorities here aren't clear. A force must attack an enemy force projecting a zone of control into it, but there's exceptions if the two forces are separated by a primary river. If it's solely adjacent to enemy forces which are inside the fortress, if it's a fortress hex behind a force in a fortress hex, or protected behind an earthworks hex side, or a force composed half or more demoralized units, or with an attack finished. And remember, you get this attack finished by not attacking in some cases. You might be forcing the other guy to attack. And then the procedure is you designate the attacking force and the defending hex that you're going to attack. And then the defender shows the composition of his force there. And then we determine what kind of a battle it's going to be by this. And I'm not sure what happens if multiple criteria are in place. Attacks from march don't count against you here. Designating the defending hex. It looks to me like if you storm a fortress or sortie, you use those special types, even if there are capitanos present, but I'm not positive. If you're starting a siege, you must be in an earthworks hex at the moment of the declaration with an attack order. And so you have to have already set up your defensive positioning so that you can begin the siege works. You can't just sit there unprotected to siege. You could be in a level 1 or level 2 earthworks. And then, if you don't already have it, you get a siege status marker at level 0 in the hex, and a siege marker to indicate which force is besieging. So this goes over the defender, this goes over the attacker. The siege status marker will reflect the level of the siege status, and it's removed once the besiegers all leave their earthworks. You need an attack order to initiate siege combat. If the besieging force changes its order from attack to another order, it can't conduct siege combat, but the siege marker remains until somebody leaves those earthworks, or everybody leaves those earthworks. A force of demoralized combat units attacked must retreat before combat after step 2 of the combat sequence. Well, what's step 2? I think step 2 is the designation of the defending force. The retreat follows the rules of retreat after combat, except it'll be pursued by the attacking adjacent forces as if it's retreated into an enemy zone of control. And then the combat would be over and the winner can advance as if it's a skirmish, I guess. Okay, regardless of what it might have been. Terrain, all battles take place in the terrain. During a skirmish, a siege combat, or sortie, the terrain of the battle hex is taken into account on the assault table. Fortress effects are awarded in addition to other terrain in the hex, only if the force defends inside the fortress. During siege combat, artillery fire is affected by the terrain of the hex of the force subject to fire. Now, in a major battle, terrain is taken into account, but it's taken into account by these earthworks and river and stuff like that, as well as some other things in the tactical options chart. Attacking through a secondary river into a hex with a force in earthworks, the defending force gets the benefits from the earthworks river if they play the chit for it. But otherwise, apparently there will be effects here. If we find the charts for this. Okay, somewhere tactical option, maybe it says something. No, it doesn't. There's the affecting and not affecting terrain, and we'll see if they have some effect on it. I assume they do. All right, I got something cooking. So I guess this is part 1 of these rules, and we've gotten through about halfway. So I'd expect at least another hour or 2 of me babbling and trying to explain the rules. I'm going to send this one off because it's taken a long time.